Violet, are you there?
I'm right here.
Wonderful. So, we'd love to hear whatever you'd like to share. The topic today is schools.
Yes.
Um, and you were a special education teacher early in your career. So, whatever you want to share, we'd love to hear, please.
Well, let's see. I'll start by saying that, when I was long time ago, in 6 years, I'll be 100. But anyway, um, I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the site of the famous Harvard University, as well as MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, two famous colleges. That's the town I grew up in, and it was pretty interesting. When I was in high school, that's got to be in the 40s during the war. I was in high school all during the war, World War II, um, and we had to we had to decide whether we were going to go to college or whether we were going to find commercial jobs. And in order to be allowed to take certain classes, for example, if I were going to go to college, I couldn't take typing classes because that was a commercial class. So my brother, I had two older brothers, and they felt I should learn how to type. And they just convinced my mother to go to the school to tell them that I needed to take typing. And that was pretty interesting because for 5 years of my life, I earned my living typing. So it's a good thing to, besides knowing how to type on a computer, it's a good thing to know. There were no computers during that time, of course, you know that. And so we had a lot of privileges being the high school in Cambridge near Harvard. And we could use their library and stuff like it was really wonderful. And anyway, after I graduated, and I think in 1945, I graduated high school, and the war was still on in parts of the world, and but anyway, I went. My parents, when I was a senior, moved from Cambridge to Florida because my father wasn't needed a warmer climate. It gets really cold in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Anyway, so we moved to Florida, and when I graduated, and I really wanted to go back north to go to college, maybe even back to Cambridge. But I did go to New York because my aunt, my mother's sister, lived in New York. And I went to New York. I went to New York University, NYU, for a year. And during that year, I met my husband, Harold Oaklander, and we decided to get married uh, at the end of that year of school. Anyway, so I got married and had to work while he went to school. Isn't that what women did? I don't know of other parts of the world, but that's what we did here. And so I worked several years while he went. I mean, we were both very, very young. And we were both 18 when we met. Anyway, eventually we got married and we had three wonderful children. And I we moved several times because of a job situation, and finally we ended up in California. And in California, I was able to go to school again because um, there was everywhere you lived in California, there was a school you could go to. So I went back to school because I'd only had that year at New York University. I went back to school with three children. Uh, I was in my 30s, and it was very interesting because I was a little older than the other students, you know, than the young students. Anyway, I learned some wonderful things. For example, in the first year, I was a student teacher in the fifth grade, and I used to play the guitar. So I'd bring my guitar to school and play it. And one day the teacher said to me, the master teacher, don't bring your guitar anymore. And I said, why? They love it. She said, well, that's why. They love it too much. And I couldn't believe she said that, but that was what I began to learn in the schools at that time was that it wasn't good for kids to be having a good time. They're supposed to be serious and study and learn. They're not supposed to laugh and enjoy. So I stopped bringing the guitar, and the kids were very upset and clamored for it because they loved singing. They learned I knew many, many children's songs. They learned many songs and remembered the words and really enjoyed the whole process. But anyway, so the other thing I learned, well, so the next assignment I had was in a kindergarten class, and it was the worst class I've ever experienced. The teacher would, the children would be painting on the easel, and the teacher would tear their papers off the easel and say, do your arms come out of your neck? You know, all 5-year-olds draw people's arms coming out of their neck. It's what they do. And she would scream at them. I mean, really scream at them. And it just broke my heart. But I actually did complain about her. And they said, no, 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 she's one of our best master teachers. So what could I do? Anyway, and there were other similar things that she would do that taught me. What I learned was what not to do. It's important to, if you're teaching, to understand the level of, let's say, art that children go through, which this teacher did not know at all, and made the kids feel really bad because she'd rip their papers off the easel. I could hardly believe it. Well, when I started doing my own classes, before I taught emotionally disturbed children, I taught almost 3 years in a regular classrooms. And the principal would come into my room often. I guess I was an alternative teacher before I knew what that meant. Anyway, she'd come in because I had the kids in committees. We studied. It was during the time we were sending somebody to the moon and committees on all the different planets. and they would talk while they were in committee, and it would be noisy. And she would say, "It's too noisy. You have to keep these kids quiet." And that would really upset me. I used to go home and cry and say to my husband, "I'm not cut out to be a teacher. I'm just not. It's just not for me." In fact, the principal used to say to me, "Have you ever thought of going into recreation?" And anyway, uh, I did many things in those regular years that were different, and it was an interesting time. And then the counselor of the school, in those days, every the counselor. Nowadays, they have this. How is that?
Just keep talking.
Well, anyway, the counselor suggested I look into these new programs for emotionally disturbed children. And I did, and I got the job. I applied for the job, and there weren't too many people interested yet in working with emotionally disturbed children. And it was, you had 12 children and an aide, and it was, to me, that was amazing. I'm just stopping because there's a whole lot of noise, paper noise, I don't know. Um, so when I worked with emotionally disturbed children, I could do whatever I wanted at that time, and that was great. We had animals in the classroom. We had, it was really great. We did a lot of building with saws and hammers and nails, and was a favorite activity. I don't think the schools were much different actually than they are today. I don't know. Maybe teachers have more um, education about what children do. I have a master's in special education, and I don't remember really learning much of anything. So, so most of what I did, I made up myself, and that was the time I was started training in the Gestalt Therapy Institute in Los Angeles, and I was very, I had a personal experience where it was very powerful for me. And so I started thinking, how can I bring this to children? And came up with many ideas that seemed to work. And in fact, it makes up what you are now calling the Oaklander method. Um, it's the philosophy and theory of Gestalt therapy combined with all kinds of things that children love to do, working with clay, working with puppets, working with sand tray, and drawing, and many other things. Anyway, that's um, where I am is a few years.
Bless you.
Thank you. A few years ago, I can't remember. Oh, then after I taught mostly start children in the schools for about 9 years. I went into private practice. I got my PhD in moved into private practice, working with kids and some adults. Anyway, I love doing it. I enjoyed doing it very much. And I guess it's you do what you're calling the Oaklander method, which is very flattering to have a method named after you. You know, it seems interesting to me because I just did what seemed right to do with the kids. And so I guess that's enough for today.
Well, whatever you thought seemed right seems to be pretty wonderful, because all these years later, we're all here to still talk about it and learn how to teach others. And so we're all here saying how grateful we are. Thank you.
Very welcome.